Thanks, Joan Home, for joining us this hour. It's really good to have you here. So there were 4 of them altogether, 4 of them thus far. The first one was put up in 2008. It was in Glendora, Mississippi, which is a tiny little town in Mississippi. It's less than 200 people. It was right on the bank of the Tallahatchie River in Glendora. At this spot, from the 1840s until the 1890s, there had been a big steamboat landing there on the bank of the river. So it's kind of a bustling spot. There had been a lot of coming and going. It was a site of commerce. There were roads and buildings, of course, around there because of that steamboat landing. But in the 1890s, a tornado came and wiped out that steamboat landing on the riverbank. And they never rebuilt it. And so all that's left at that spot to this day is just kind of a wide spot, just kind of a clearing, a break in the vegetation through which you can get down to the river. That is where they put the sign up in 2008. But as soon as they put it up, somebody came in and tore it down. This was the posts that it was standing on. You can see it's been cut off. They tore it down. They cut it off its posts. They threw the sign in the river. It didn't last there 6 months before somebody destroyed it. After that first sign got torn down, they put up a second one, another one just like it. This was the second sign. What are all those holes in it? Well, people started shooting at it. By the time this one was taken down in 2016, it had 317 bullet holes in it. 317. In 2018, they put up yet another new one, a third one. This time it was a big, sturdy one that they thought really could stand up to it. This time the sign was really heavy. It weighed 50 pounds. Lasted barely a month before that one was full of bullet holes, too. In July of 2019, 3 fraternity brothers, 3 white fraternity brothers from Ole Miss, from the University of Mississippi, which is actually kind of far from there. It's an hour-and-a-half drive away. They posed in front of the shot up sign, holding rifles and a shotgun in the picture. So that third sign, it came down as well. So now it is the 4th version of the sign that is up now. And this one doesn't weigh 50 pounds. This one weighs 500 pounds. It's made of 1/2-inch thick AR-500 steel, which is what they make good armor plating from. It was a company in New York, actually, a company called Light Bright Neon Studio in Brooklyn, New York, that made this sign pro bono. They made it, they shipped it, they installed it at their own expense. And this time, the 4th version of this sign, this time it's made to be able to withstand a rifle round. And of course, it needs to be. The reason this sign, the reason all of these signs, all 4 of them in succession, were put up there on that bank of the Tallahatchie River is because in 1955, that's the spot. It's believed that that's the spot where the body of a 14-year-old kid was hauled out of that river. He was 14 years old. He was from Chicago. He was staying with relatives in Mississippi. He was accused of whistling at a white woman. The white woman also said that the 14-year-old boy had grabbed her and made lewd comments to her, as well as whistling at her, but he had not done that. More than 50 years later, she finally admitted that she'd actually lied and made that all up. But of course, by then, it was more than 50 years too late. 2 white men, Roy Bryant and J.W. Milam, abducted the 14-year-old boy. They threw him into a pickup truck. They tortured him horribly, and they murdered him. And they were put on trial for murder in front of an all-white jury, which acquitted them. Those 2 men admitted in court to the kidnapping part of the crime, but when a grand jury was asked to indict them for kidnapping, which they admitted to in open court, the grand jury wouldn't even indict them for that. So acquitted of murder, not even indicted for kidnapping. And soon after they were acquitted of murder, the 2 men did a magazine interview that they got paid for, and they cheerfully admitted in that magazine interview that of course they'd committed the murder. Of course they'd killed that kid. The boy's name was Emmett Till, and the site where his body was found, that's where the sign memorializing his murder has been torn down and thrown in the river and cut off its supports and spray painted and doused with acid and shot at, literally hundreds and hundreds of times. The marker noting the place where his 14-year-old body, tortured, mutilated body, was pulled out of the river, that's the place where that sign keeps having to be rebuilt and re-put up. Tomorrow, the President of the United States will designate that a national monument, that site. The Emmett Till and Mamie Till Mobley National Monument will be created by President Biden tomorrow. And this new monument includes 3 sites: that riverbank site, where the sign has gone up and up again and up again and up again, and it's now a bulletproof 500-pound version of the sign. The riverbank site. Also, the site of the courthouse where the men who admitted killing Emmett Till were acquitted by the all-white jury. That courthouse will be part of this national monument as well. That courthouse is also where local officials apologized to Emmett Till's family in 2007, which is the year before the first sign went up on that riverbank. The 3rd site in this new national monument will be in Chicago at a church, at the Roberts Temple Church of God in Christ, where more than 10,000 people turned out for young Emmett Till's funeral in September 1955, after he'd been murdered. His mother, Mamie Till Mobley, she made the decision to allow a photograph of her brutalized son to be taken for Jet magazine and the Chicago Defender newspaper. Emmett Till's mother made the decision that her son would lie in an open casket at his funeral so everybody could see what had been done to him. Again, the national monument that'll be designated tomorrow by President Biden will be named both for Emmett Till and for his mother. It's called the Emmett Till and Mamie Till Mobley National Monument. Becoming a national monument means, technically now, this is protected land, protected by the federal government, protected and maintained by the National Park Service in perpetuity. With this particular new national monument, with that site in particular on that riverbank in Mississippi that's been treated like a shooting gallery, that has had 4 different markers go up. The latest one, 500 pounds and bulletproof, protected by a gate and alarms and cameras. But where a white nationalist group nevertheless tried to shoot an anti-black white power propaganda video just a few years ago in 2019. With this newest designated national monument, I don't know how it's going to go for that to be federally protected land, something that the National Park Service agrees to maintain and protect in perpetuity, but they now have that responsibility. And that is a start. That's something. President Biden will sign that proclamation designating the new national monument tomorrow on what would have been Emmett Till's 82nd birthday, had he lived past the age of 14. And this designation, this decision to do this by President Biden, this comes at a time when it certainly feels right to do something like that. It comes at a time when the state of Florida has just approved bizarre new mandates for teaching African-American history in the state of Florida. These new rules created under Florida Republican Governor Ron DeSantis, these rules order teachers in Florida to say effectively that slavery wasn't that bad. Had some upsides, at least, according to Florida's new official history instructions for teachers. Enslaved people were lucky enough to learn skills and trades while they were being enslaved and sold and tortured and raped and murdered with impunity. These new history regulations in Florida compel teachers to point out the upsides of slavery. It's just astonishing. Florida's Republican Governor Ron DeSantis, who of course is at the helm of a floundering presidential campaign at the moment, he frankly seems divided within himself as to whether he wants to distance himself from this abomination. He sort of tried that a little bit. Oh, that wasn't me. That I didn't do that. That didn't have anything to do with me. He's sort of divided within himself as to whether or not he should distance himself from it, say he had nothing to do with it, or maybe he should embrace it because, after all, he loves controversy, particularly when it relies on racial provocation, and maybe there might be some way for him and his campaign to benefit from this particular racially provocative controversy. But this new national monument also comes at a time when Alabama's state legislature, which of course is overwhelmingly Republican, Alabama's legislature appears poised to do something very, very radical to make sure that black voters in Alabama cannot elect representatives of their choice. You may have heard the Supreme Court of the United States. This may have crossed your radar. The Supreme Court of the United States, you might know, right now is a very conservative body. A 6-3 hard-right conservative majority on the nation's highest court as we speak. But even so, even that hard-line conservative 6-3 court could not swallow the recent decision by Alabama's legislature to draw up congressional districts in that state. So there's only one black majority district in the whole state, in a state where a quarter of the population is black. The High Court ordered the state of Alabama to make a new map where there are 2 such districts where black voters might be able to elect a representative of their choice. They have been ordered to do this by the federal courts. Alabama is refusing to do it, even though Alabama technically is a state in the United States of America, which is a country that is technically subject to the rulings of the Supreme Court of the United States. Even the Alabama parts of the United States are subject to federal court orders. But apparently they're deciding on this issue that they maybe don't want to be. So we're going to talk about this more in detail a little later on in the show tonight with someone who's right in the middle of this fight. But Alabama deciding it just might not follow federal court orders when it comes to black people voting in 2023. It's not like a rascally little tantrum that Alabama is throwing here. This is the whole point of the country kind of stuff. This is as serious as it gets. I mean, defying federal court orders, to state the obvious, that is a fast drive down a short road for any country. And any state in the Deep South, any state that, say, seceded during the Civil War, is very, very well aware of that. They are very well aware of how radical this is. But of course, it's even more resonant, it's even more incendiary to do it right now, because Governor Slavery was not that bad DeSantis really does not look like he's going to go the distance in the Republican nominating contest. He's just running a terrible, terrible campaign that's sort of getting worse and more expensive by the day. He seems to be the only person who ever had a prayer of being within shooting distance, proverbial shooting distance, forgive me, of the Republican frontrunner. I mean, the Republican Party really does look poised to renominate its frontrunner, to renominate the candidate who is dominating all their presidential polling by 20, 30, 40 points. And if nobody can get anywhere near him, if they do renominate Donald Trump as their candidate for president, that means the whole campaign for president, the whole election for president of the United States over the course of this next year is going to be, in large part, a referendum on this question of whether we follow court orders anymore as a country, whether the legal system binds us, whether it binds all of us. Because the likely Republican nominee for president, as things are going, the prohibitive favorite to be the Republican nominee for president, he is facing a trial in October on a $250 million civil fraud case brought by the New York Attorney General, then another civil trial in January on defamation claims related to sexual assault allegations against him, then another civil trial later in January on a multi-million-dollar civil fraud case related to an alleged pyramid scheme type thing that he was involved in, then a criminal trial in March on the New York State hush money charges, then a federal criminal trial in May on his federal felony criminal indictment for his handling of classified documents, and meanwhile, we're waiting on news of additional potential criminal indictments of him personally, both at the federal level and in the state of Georgia, related to his efforts to overthrow the government and stay in power after he lost re-election. So if that's the, personal schedule of the Republican Party nominee for president, A, busy, and B, the election is going to be about this. It's going to be the referendum question posed both implicitly and explicitly by his candidacy. Do we choose him or do we choose law? Do we choose the law? Does the law apply to us all? Does it protect us all? Does it constrain us all? Or do we want this guy instead? And all of the myriad things he has to offer. The sixth and final episode of my new podcast, Deja News, just posted today. It's been 6 episodes altogether. Now we're done. It's been a blast. It's been a ton of work, but I'm really glad that we did it. You can listen to all 6 of them for free on any podcast app. It's called Rachel Maddow Presents Deja News. And